Hello, everyone. I welcome you to a new series, which I have titled, Why Am I Struggling with Office Politics? And this is, I'm sure, a query most of us as emerging women leaders would have, if at all we find ourselves in a space where we are an emerging woman leader. However, office politics is keeping us stuck in our career and are kind of creating a hindrance to our career progression. So through this series, what I intend to do is create a lot of tools and techniques that I'm sure you will find it helpful if you are just like my client and my own younger version, I should say, many years ago, an emerging woman leader who would struggle with office politics, not really being able to understand why so. So let's start from the basics. Who is it for? Let's first address this question. This series is actually for anyone who are interested to learn how to navigate office politics and the power dynamics without compromising on your integrity. However, to be very, very specific, this is for emerging women leaders who find themselves just like Anupama. So I bring to you, let's take an example of Anupama. She has more than a decade of work experience. She's extremely competent, and since she's an emerging woman leader, she's part of the mid-level management, while she is aiming for higher senior leadership roles. Somewhere at present, she is struggling because she is not really been able to understand how her lack of ability to navigate office politics and the power dynamics are keeping her stuck. So this one is more for people like my younger version, as I mentioned earlier, many years ago, and people like Anupama. Before we get into the technique that I'm about to teach you, which will help you get at the basics of it, so that it equip you with really managing office politics, or rather answering this question that we just asked at the beginning of this workshop. Why am I struggling to deal with office politics? So my story is about my struggle with the subject of mathematics. And I'm sharing this story with you because I'm sure it will resonate, and also to let you know I've been in this space. And through my story, I would also like to convey how my experiences impacted me when I was in that space. So many, many years ago, when I was a teenager and I entered my seventh, not a teenager, I should say, even younger than that, and I entered my seventh standard, that's when the subject of mathematics became more and more tough for me. I was supported through tuitions. However, I was also compared to my cousins who were really good at the subject. And while my academic years in school, from 7th standard to 10th standard, when I actually passed out from ICSE board, subject of mathematics was something I always dread. I'm not sure whether I really couldn't, was so poor at it, I really couldn't get those concepts, algebra, trigonometry, and stuff like that. More than that, it was the fear, it was the constant comparison, and coinciding with my growing years as I was getting into my teenage and then uh, into this adolescent years, where our sense of self is at the highest. This failure, because I failed in the subject with very low scores, and my constant effort and the fear on the back of my mind whether I'll pass my boards because mathematics was a subject that I cannot afford to flunk, uh, made me all the more fear it, look at the whole thing as an experience, quite negative, and I really somehow wanted to pass it out. Well, came 10th standard. By grace of God and my own hard work, I barely passed, but I was able to clear it in my first attempt. And I kind of thanked my stars and the most merciful God and then moved on. But this trauma, this negative experience, and this whole concept of failure, which was one of the very first that I encountered in my adolescent years, played an impact many years later. So let's now fast forward my life, and I'm into my corporate life, just like Anupama, an emerging woman leader, where I had opportunities working with the who's and who's of the industry in top MNCs. However, with my expertise, with my competence or my knowledge, skills, and abilities, there were times when I would be given a platform or I would be in a particular project or an assignment where I would not make the most of it because somewhere in my mind, in my subconscious mind, specifically when I was in the project management, since at that time I had still not passed my PMI certification, I was of the opinion that to do PMI, I may need to study certain subjects which will be related to mathematics, or only engineers or MBAs from B schools does this, and all sorts of stories that ran in my head. And that's where uh, this fear surfaced up, the fear of failure, the fear of thinking I'm not good enough. And when I told this to myself that I'm not good enough, this was the fear of failure, my constant comparison to all my other cousins who were very good with it and have excelled in life. Today, fast forward, I was comparing myself to all my colleagues who have excelled. So my cousin got replaced with my colleagues, and I was back into that same fear zone, that same zone of self-doubt, of thinking I am not good enough, I'm not sure I can do it. And this was all over me, in my body language, in the way I approach things. So regardless of my technical competence or my interpersonal skills, one of the biggest outcome of that was I missed good opportunities. And I struggle, if I say it in very simple words, navigating the power dynamics and ability to manage office politics, unless I met my coach who really helped me transform my entire being. But till that time, my struggle continued. And so I can vouch for it that I've been there and I've seen it and I have firsthand experienced what it takes to really find yourself stuck in it. This very series stems from there, where I would like to share with you some very simple practical strategies that you could implement, and you may not have to go through what I went through and not miss out on opportunities, because I really want you to rise and shine. So moving on, here I bring to you the steps to clarity, wherein I have divided, it's actually a methodology, but what I've done here is, since we are doing the basics of it, I've divided it into 5 steps. In this, the first thing is we'll explore different parts of ourselves. When I say parts of ourselves, here I mean our entire being, our persona, like uh, the various roles you play in your life. The different parts of us is about, it's about you, but in different role, and certain things you like about yourself and certain things you do not like. So the step one is where you're exploring different parts of you, And you're specifically exploring here the one you do not like about yourself. So, like, as I just gave you an example, I was never good with mathematics. So, if you ask me, a part of me is that the calculative Mehnaz who always had a self doubt that she was not good with the subject of mathematics, stuff like that. So, explore different parts of you and create a list of what you do not like about yourself. You can, step 2 is where you can pick from all the roles and you can have to create a list. Step 3 is you write it all down, and then we move to the fourth and fifth step, are very closely connected. And I'll tell you in a minute from now how the fourth and fifth step will help you navigate office politics. So here's a example that you're seeing right in front of you on the screen. This comes from me. I actually pulled out my journal and pulled out the work I did with my coach, and this is what I came up with. So these are the list of me where I actually didn't really liked about me, and basis on which. So this list is of acceptance list, but the above list is the things that I do not uh, specifically like about me. And to each of those, I have written this acceptance part. So after writing it down, I have to sit through this list and repeat to my own self that I accept part of me that's good, that's being a good caregiver to my elderly parents. I accept that part of me that leave dishes in the sink. I accept that part of me which is methodical and organized. I accept that part of me which overthinks and is regretful. I accept that part of me that holds grief. I also accept that part of me which is gullible and naive. I accept that part of me that was bullied in school. So here's my list, friends. I would want you to create your own. So first thing, be aware of the different parts of yourself, specifically the ones you like and also the ones you don't. And then write it, because once you specifically write the ones you do not like about yourself, next to it, you need to now write that of all that you have not liked, you accept that part of you. Now, this simple technique where we are listing the things we like about ourselves, and against that, we are accepting that very thing. Through this, we are rewiring our mind by creating new neural pathways. And this might sound simple, but you will be amazed by the change it will bring inside you when you actually sit, write, and then read out to yourself this acceptance part. And then finally, you get into the action of acceptance, which is where you completely surrender to your own self. So you explore the parts of you, you write down what you do not like about you. Then against that, you rewrite again that you accept those parts of you which you have earlier identified as which you didn't like. So you're rewiring your mind, you're rewiring your inner self-talk, you're rewiring your inner self-critique, and with this writing it down, you're entering into a phase of awareness and understanding what is it that you don't like. That's your first step. Then you're acknowledging it. And finally, you're surrendering to all that you've been rejecting about yourself. This is a step, and this is the space through which you now enter a complete, total surrender, let going of any perfection or any perfectionist tendencies, and fully accepting yourself the way you are. This practice might sound simple. You do it the first time, you do it the second time, you do it the third time. With every time of you doing this, you find yourself, there's a softening inside you. and you're opening up yourself to all those areas of life you've been rejecting so far, which is quite deep and profound. And here's where you're not only rewiring your mind, there's something inside you that will eventually change. And then when you find yourself back into the space of where I was many years ago, or for that matter, Anupama, as an emerging woman leader, ready to take on, the next levels, you would find that it's way more easier than doing it with so much of inner self-critique and rejections that we've been carrying on since years, which we do not really understand the very first time we do it. But as you explore your parts, write down your list, you'll be amazed with what you will come up with. And friends, one very important point here is, unless we know ourselves well and beware of ourselves and acknowledge our rights and the wrongs and accept the way we are, it is kind of one of the most, I should say, powerful mental strength activity that you could ever do. Unless you do so, you could not navigate anything. While office politics is all about dealing with strategies, building relations, networks, alliances, and understanding the unwritten, unspoken rules of power at workspace, you'll be armored, and you couldn't do it without first knowing yourself, a complete surrender to who you are. Unless you do so, I'm sure you could never get to that point. And one more tip that I would like to leave and close the session: look around in your workspace and pay attention to all those already existing leaders, be it men and women. And I'm sure you will find, when you look at them, that they are people who are personally quite aware. And you may not really find them struggling, but people who have, with the help of support of experts, coaches, and their own investment of time and commitment on their personal development, have reached those positions, which started from this very basic point, which was to become 1 inch closer to yourself, become aware of things, various parts of you, things you actually do not like, and then accepting it. Because everything begins and ends with self. Unless you know and you accept yourself, nobody else would ever accept you in whatever avatar you may want to create for yourself. So go for it, practice this, and let me know what comes up for you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and attention. I would just like to close this with what Carl Jung said: the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. It's not an easy feat, friends, but it's also not impossible. With the support of my coach, it took me years, but I found my ground and my success with a lot of freedom that I never thought was possible, and the success I made. I wish you the same to your success. Go ahead, practice it. This is the basics. This is just the start. And I'm very excited to be part of you, along with you in this journey, while you learn along with me. And for anything else, if you ever feel the need to talk, to discuss, or to seek support, I'm leaving my coordinates in the description of this video. Feel free to connect and let's talk. Thank you.